and Animate Weapon Infernal Legion Minion Instability triggered by Frenzy from Poet's Pen with Bladefall Lingering Blade Automation from Spellslinger.
It's alive! Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Yeah. This is the build guide, gameplay footage and some complimentary full clear videos down in the description down below.
Look at it sparkle.
Pop, 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 pop. And hello and welcome to the Animate Weapon Popcorn Factory build guide. In this video from now on you will see some additional gameplay footage as well as 15 detailed chapters like one on your screen. Without further ado, let's jump straight in, chapter number 1, pros and cons of the Popcorn Factory. And the point number 1. This build is rather cheap and simple to operate. It will fit into more chill, relaxed and casual playstyles. This build do not require any 6 or 5 links at all and do not rely on something like 7 link minion helmets for a lot of currency. All uniques in this build are rather cheap and high supply items. And surprisingly enough, you can do any map modifier on the Minion Instability build. That includes your physical reflex, elemental reflex and no mana and life regen. Of course you can easily do tier 16 maps and clear your guardians. Life pool is usually around 7 to 8k life with a minimal investment and you can overcap your physical damage reduction, attack block and spell block. And to spice it up, yes, you are proper minion necromancer and that means that you can off-screen your enemies and just stand right over the corner. And as usual, any build will have their own disadvantages. First of all, you are playing Minion Instability and that means that there is delay around 1 second before your minions explode. That alone makes a build a bit more challenging than usual to operate. Your single target damage is rather mediocre and you will need to know hard encounters like Uber Elder or Sirius to survive them. Of course, your clear speed will vary from medium to high, but for the investment it's surprisingly fast. And rather sad part, there is no real way to upgrade your damage with big chunks. The build is only about min-maxing your attack speed, minion life, minion damage, and you are pretty much limited to 6 inventory slots with some implicits, suffixes and prefixes. And now for our major passive choices, the Ascendancy, Keystones and important notables. So our Ascendancy is Necromancer. The unnatural strength with +2 level of all minion skill gems is rather straightforward choice for any minion build. We do run the bone barrier for our typical physical damage reduction, and minions have 20% more maximum life is rather important for our damage scaling, because the minion life will be always way more better than minion damage on the Minion Instability build. The Mistress of Sacrifice allows us to cast our offering skills on ourselves, and we do run Bone Offering on this build. So for our major keystones, we of course do the Minion Instability. The Minion Instability will deal fire damage equal to 33% of maximum life of our minions. And to scale fire damage, we run Elemental Equilibrium. That means that when we hit enemy by ourselves with the cold or lightning source, the fire damage will go down and the Minion Stability will deal more damage with fire. And of course we run Glancing Blows to benefit greatly from our Bone Offering, and it will increase our block attack damage and block spell damage. And of course we will take some damage from blocked hits, but it actually will synergize with something later. And of course there are notables. The important notables to note is actual Death Attunement, and we will run some Spectres, so having +1 to maximum number of Spectres is rather advantageous. And we do run Whispers of Doom, because we can apply an additional curse and scale our damage even further, and we do run Spiritual Command, because the increases and reductions to minion attack speed is rather important, because aside the minion life, the attack speed is other damage scaling factor on this build. And now for our main offense loop. At first we are launching our Frenzy skill attack from our wand. After that our Spellslinger support will trigger the supported Bladefall. The Bladefall in itself will trigger the lingering blades on the ground. Then our Frenzy skill attack from wand will actually trigger the point span, which itself will trigger the Animate Weapon and consume the lingering blades. After that the Infernal Legion support will burn Animate Weapons while they aim themselves to the enemy. When the life of the minions will be low enough, the Minion Instability will be triggered and the fire damage will be delivered. And now for our main defense loops. Our main defenses are fully automated and consist from 2 custom and damage taken setups. When the minor damage taken, our secondary custom and damage taken will actually trigger Desecrate and generate some corpses. When we received the minor damage, our custom and damage taken first setup will actually trigger the Bone Offering, consuming the generated corpses from Desecrate or any other corpse on the ground. When the Bone Offering is triggered, it will actually increase our blocking ability thanks to our Ascendancy and will heal us on block. When even more minor damage taken, the custom and damage taken 2 will actually trigger the Convocation and recall our Spectres. Our Spectres do have the Proximity Shield and it itself will block any incoming projectiles, which is very handy in a lot of encounters. And if we will receive even more damage, the custom and damage taken primary setup will actually trigger the Feast of Flesh from the Devouring Diadem and heal us even more from the corpse consumption. And now for our Animate Weapon link chain. The Animate Weapon in itself is rather ridiculous minion with rather great and solid life pool. So we want to scale that life pool, and that in turn means that more levels means more life and more damage from our Minion Instability. I consider the level 21 gem as soon as possible purchase. The quality of the gem is not so important because it generally do not scale damage at all. So go for level 21 as soon as possible. And of course after that we will go for the minion life to scale our damage even further. You can go for the minion damage support, but marginally it's a bit worse choice. After that we will link the Infernal Legion support. The Infernal Legion support is rather important because it triggering our Minion Instability. It will burn your minions for 40% of their maximum life as fire damage. And it is important to note that you want the 0 quality on this gem. If you have any quality on this gem, your burn time until the Minion Instability will be actually increased and your damage will be delayed even further. And now our main weapon, if you can call it that. The Poet's Pen is solid unique, and basically if you have level 75 and higher, you have at least plus 3 levels of your socketed active skill gem. So your Animate Weapon will gain at least plus 3 levels at level 75 and plus 4 levels on the level 100 of course. So of course the Poet's Pen will trigger your Animate Weapon on itself when you do the wand attack from any other wand attack. So this is your automation for the Animate Weapon in itself. This is the key unique item that you need to have on that build. And the prices for the Poet's Pen is usually rather low, and you can find solid one for the dozen or so Chaos Orbs in any challenge league. And now for our main source of lingering blades. We run Spellslinger support as natural fit for our wand of Poet's Pen. It will trigger any supported spells when we fire projectiles from any other wand attack. Bear in mind we socket it into the body armor as a part of 2-link combination with the Bladefall support. So Bladefall in itself will fire 5 volleys and leave the lingering blade in the ground for every volley. So these 2 skill gems will be socketed in slot number 5 and number 6 on your armor and will be only 2 linked. Of course, since Bladefall is the area of effect ability, it will most likely trigger your elemental equilibrium if you have any lightning or cold source on your gear. And now for our main trigger source for our Animate Weapon from Poet's Pen and for our Spellslinger with the Bladefall combination. We run Frenzy Attack skill gem. It in itself will generate frenzy charges and benefit greatly from quality 20%. Also, you can run it on level 1, it does not really matter because it's not your main damage source. To support and give it even more attack speed, we run faster attack support as second link, and of course we run it as a double 4-link setup with a shield charge. Shield charge in itself is solid ability to trigger your elemental equilibrium and to move around. And we can support the actual shield charge with Fortify support to give us increased tanking abilities and decrease the damage that we take. And now for our main improvements in the frenzy department. If you're willing to invest a bit more currency than basically no currency, we can run faster attacks support from the Elder Gloves as built-in suffix, as well as we can run the Fortify support from the Elder Boots at the built-in suffix. Both of them are solid choices. Fortify support usually a bit more pricier option is if you go for the boots. And what we actually run in one empty slot that we gain, we can run life gain on hit support for more tanking, and we can actually run the cooling strike support for more offensive capabilities. It in itself will kill some enemies, and of course we will have more attack speed for our frenzy and for our animate weapon generation. And finally, when you are done with your Animate Weapon, Spellslinger support, with your Frenzy and even Elemental Equilibrium, you are left with the curses as the final part of your skill gem puzzle in the damage department. So I run Bane support as great way to trigger my dual curses. it will trigger any linked curses to it and natural fit as part of free link in our shield. For the curses I run the elemental weakness to lower fire resistance a bit lower and flammability to lower it even more lower. Is it even a sentence? I don't know. So 2 curses, elemental weakness and flammability, and trigger setup from Bane. And now let's delve deep into our bone offering setup automation. First of all, of course, the bone offering itself will apply to us because we run Mistress of Sacrifice Ascendancy, and we will be healed with every single block, and of course overcap our block attack damage and will increase our block spell damage greatly. So we of course automated it with the cast when damage taken support. Important note, both gems should be the same level to trigger correctly. We already increasing the bone offering level with our unnatural strength and with the devouring diadem, which in itself is rather great unique that we use. So run cast when damage taken and bone offering on the same level. No requirement for any quality on your cast when damage taken support. So the actual devouring diadem is the solid unique. It's rather cheap, sometimes it could be pricey in the league start, but generally drops rather drastically in the first week. So it in itself will help us to run 2 additional auras in the helmet, and it will actually trigger the Fist of Flesh every 5 seconds on itself. And Fist of Flesh is rather powerful tanking ability, but important note that we do run cast when damage taken on high level. So when the cast when damage taken is higher than the level 15, it will trigger the Fist of Flesh. Fist of Flesh will no longer trigger from your devouring diadem every 5 seconds. It will be triggered when you take the cast when damage taken accordingly. First you trigger your bone offering, then you trigger your Fist of Flesh. And of course the devouring diadem in itself is rather powerful for the Eldritch Battery keystone built in. So Eldritch Battery is our mana solution for this build. It will replace your mana management with your energy shield management, that's it. And since the Devouring Diadem gives us great buffs for auras, we run 2 auras in 2 left sockets. The first one is the Determination. It will increase our armor drastically and also increase our physical damage reduction. After that we run Summoner Skitterbots for their general utility for our Ascendancy and for our, of course, damage with the shock effect and for tanking with its chill effect. So this is the 2 solid auras that you can run, and generally there are not a lot of choices for the Minion Instability build when you come to the aura department. And finally for our 4-link Race Spectre setup. In this build we run Race Spectre and we rely on 3 Undying Evangelist Spectres from Act 3 Scepter of God area. Those Spectres will trigger the Proximity Shield ability. That ability is rather great and will delete any incoming projectile. And to increase its uptime we will support the Race Spectre with the increased duration support. Increased duration support will increase the uptime of the Proximity Shield up to 16 seconds. And since we run 3 Undying Evangelists, they will generally desync during the map and the uptime of Proximity Shield will be almost perfect. So for the next support we run Feeding Frenzy. It will also apply not only to our minions, but it will apply the attack speed to us in itself. Why? Because we run the Spiritual Command Notable, and increases and decreases to attack speed of minions also applies to us. More attack speed means more reliable and more fast animate weapon generation. And of course, to finish it off, we run Combustion Support to reduce fire resistance of enemies even further, since the Animate Weapon deal the damage from Minion Instability and the Minion Instability deal fire damage. This is solid choice to increase our damage even further. And to finish it off, we want some automation. We want to automate the corpse generation and to have our specters a bit more reliably. So for that we run cast when damage taken secondary setup with the gem level 1. So when we receive just a bit of damage, it will trigger 2 other skills, and they are of course the Desecrate to spawn corpses for your bone offering setup, and of course it will trigger also the Convocation and recall our minions, and by recalling our minions we'll recall the raised spectre with their proximity shield and block any incoming projectiles. So for the Desecrate you will have the gem level 7, and for the Convocation you will have gem level 5 to synergize with the cast when damage taken on the level 1. And now for our important and somewhat mandatory unique items. The first one is the Elegant Hubris. This timeless jewel can convert your notables to the something like Axiom Warden. I will generally find at least 2 Axiom Wardens on my Elegant Hubris, and it will translate in something between 50 to 60% damage increase to your minion instability. Yes, this one is rather huge. Search for at least 2. And then I will search for something like Slumlord to increase damage of my minions even more, and for the internal resilience, so I gain the endurance charge when I hit recently, and hit recently is last 4 seconds. And important to note, the Elegant Hubris is always rather cheap, and you always can roll it with the Divine Orb if you have one that do not fit your passive tree. And another solid synergy for the build is the Fortress Covenant Cobalt Jewel. This jewel not only increases the damage of your minions, it will also convert notable passives in the radius, so your minions will take increased damage. On the first it sounds rather terrible, but paired with the Infernal Legion support on your Animate Weapon, it will trigger the Minion Instability a bit faster. And of course, the other solid choice is the Lionized Remorse in your offhand. This is the best in slot shield for its price. It have a lot of life from the implicit, it have a lot of flat armor, and have a lot of flat life from its prefix. For the price, it's the best shield that you can find. And of course the Watcher's Eye is a rather great option if you can find one with additional physical damage reduction while affected by your Determination aura. This one pretty much great, but you can also improve it by searching for something like additional armor with the Determination and additional block attack damage when you're affected by, once again, your Determination aura. And of course one and only passive skill tree of Path of Exile. So we start as a witch in that place on the tree, and generally I will first go for the minion damage over here and grab some life here and even more life over here. Here's a great place to socket something like Watcher Eye, for example. And of course then I will go to the top to have more increased area from my minion stability. I will grab my minion stability, will go for my dual curse if I already setting up the curses. If I'm not setting up curses, I will leave it until later. Then I will go for my more life to increase damage from the minion instability and of course increase number of my specters. Then I will go down here and have some mana management before I get the Divine Diadem, but overall I will leave it behind even after that. And then over here is the great place to have something like Anatomical Knowledge, but it's rather high price items, so it's just an option. And of course over here I can hit my Elemental Equilibrium and go down here for more maximum life. Then I will go around over here for my Spiritual Command through the minion life, of course, and grab some life and chaos resistances up here. The Spiritual Command is there, of course, we are having it, and we go down over here through more life, more damage, and of course we will go down here, and here is the fork for our all defensive purposes. Over here I will slot in something like Fluid Motion if I'm lacking dexterity from my gear. If you do not lack it, you can slot something else. And of course over here is a rather important slot. So over here I am slotting my Fortress Covenant. Why this socket? Well, because over here I can hit the notable and convert it into increased damage from my Infernal Legion, pretty much for no travel time. So over here is something useful, and here I have my conversion. Same comes for that node. So over here I have all my life and no travel time, I have my converted notable. And of course this notable, I'm traveling through it to my socket. And of course then I will grab my glancing blows to have my increased block attack damage, some more life over here, and rather important, the resolute technique is a rather solid option, so you always hit with your frenzy, you will never miss something. But generally if you do not run the alternative version with life on hit support, this one is rather optional. So down here is a rather solid option for your timeless hubris jewels. You always can find something useful in the minimal travel time, like I found the Oxen Warden over here and the Eternal Resilience over here. But remember, if you find something like Oxen Warden over here, or maybe Slumlord over here, you can always anoint that. So this is solid place to start searching on your timeless hubris jewels. And of course when you are leveling up past your level 90, always go down here for your more life as well. And of course for our anoint, we are anointing the Righteous Army. And for our ascendancy, here is the visual representation to complement the something that I talked before. First I go for my mindless aggression, then I go for the unnatural strength, then I grab my more damage and tanking with the bone buffering? Bone barrier, oh my god. And of course I will go for my Mistress of Sacrifice for my bone offering setup. So that's pretty much it for our passive tree. One more quick look on that. And now let's start wrapping up our build guide with the gear compendium. Generally you have around 6 slots to fill up your all requirements, but there are several actually reasonable guidelines. First of all, for your body armor. That one is rather important, and it is rather important to note in the most of the cases you will socket craft your armor by yourself. So just search for the base and then socket craft on top. Why? Because you run Spellslinger and Bladefall. Both of them are blue and green gems, and you will need to have the intelligence on dexterity base. Why? Because you have them in the socket number 5 and number 6, and this is not an option, this is just mandatory, because you will need to have 4 link and 2 link on your armor, and you can achieve that only with 4 plus 2 links. There are no 2 plus 4, there is only 4 plus 2 links in the Path of Exile. So you will search for intelligence and dexterity base depending on your choices of Spellslinger and the Bladefall in the socket number 5 and number 6. So you first craft everything in the socket department for your falling setup in the armor, and on top of that you roll your green and blue sockets in the socket number 5 and number 6. And of course for your armor you will search for maximum flat life, for maximum increased life. Of course you will search then for some elemental resistances, and if you can roll the chaos resistance and dexterity, you will be in the great place to start. Generally I will start the build gearing from the body armor. And after that I will search for some gloves. If you can have the elder version, you can save up 1 socket space, and of course you will search first for maximum flat life, you will search for flat increased attack speed, and you can also search for the essence crafted minion life, or maybe craft one yourself. Of course I will search for some elemental resistances, maybe some chaos resistances, and rather important suffixes. As I stated before, elder gloves can have the faster attacks support. If you find that one, you are in great place. And if you have the empty suffix, you can also craft the increased damage of your minions from your bench. And as stated before, you can run your frenzy setup in the Elder boots, and if you can find the Fortify on Elder suffix, it's a rather solid option. Of course, I will search for increased movement speed at first. 30 to 35% is rather mandatory, and after that I will search for maximum flat life. I will maybe search for minion life from Essence Craft if I am lucky, and I will search for my ally resistances, and if I hit the chaos resistances I will be rather happy. After that I will go for my amulet. The amulet dexterity bases are rather important because you usually will lack some dexterity, and I will anoint the righteous army on my amulet. Of course I will search for maximum flat life. I will search for minion life from the Essence Craft as usual. I will search for the ally resistances, chaos resistances, and I can find rather important suffix from the Delph with the minion deals increased damage. And of course there is a rather important option to search for the Elder version of the suffix, which increases your attack speed. And generally if you can find some dexterity, you're in the great place to start. And now let's wrap our last slots with our belts, rings and jewels. So for the belts, the Stygian Wise or maybe Vanguard belts are rather solid choices, but generally you can go with any flat life choice. Of course we search for maximum flat life for ourselves, we will search for minion life, and we will search for as maximum of ally resistances that we can find. And hitting the chaos resistance or maybe fulfilling your dexterity is rather great options. For the Abyss jewels, if you run Stygian Wise, I will generally search for the increased maximum life of your minions, I will search for the attack speed, and I will search for the suffix which increases attack speed of my minions, because as stated before, we have the increases and decreases of attack speed to ourselves from our notable as well. In the ring department, I will of course always search first for my vermilion rings, and maybe then I will search for some resistance or flat life rings if I cannot find any suitable vermilion rings. Of course it is rather important to have cold or lightning damage on our rings. It will trigger our elemental equilibrium if you do not have any cold or lightning damage source at all. So of course the maximum flight life is a rather great option, but you can always benchcraft it, and the minions deal increased damage prefix is actually can be found on any ring. Yes, it is important because it is the prefix and it is rather great place to have the prefix like that. And of course you can find Delva's suffix with the same parameters but a bit more higher modifiers. You can search for increased attack speed when you hit recently, and you can find the increased attack speed from the suffix or maybe corrupted implicit. Also, here is the last place where you can fit your resistances for the elemental damage and for the chaos damage. And of course, the dexterity over here is always an option. So that's pretty much it for our gear.
Good find, Exile. More, Exile. Go find more.